They told themselves it was temporary. That's how it started, two lives brushing past each other like strangers who would soon forget. But forgetting was never an option, no matter how hard they tried. Ethan met Daniel on a rainy evening, the kind where the sky seemed determined to drown the city. They both reached for the same last umbrella at the small corner shop, their hands colliding awkwardly. "Sorry," Ethan muttered, pulling back. Daniel smiled, shaking his head. "You take it. I live close." "You're already soaked," Ethan replied, noticing how the rain clung to Daniel's dark hair, dripping down his jawline. Daniel laughed softly. "So are you." There was a pause, one of those strange, weightless moments where time seemed to hesitate. "Then, we could share it," Ethan said, surprising even himself. That was how it began. One umbrella. Two strangers. And a silence that somehow felt like home. They told themselves it was nothing. Just walks after work. Just late-night conversations that stretched into early mornings. Just laughter that came too easily. Just the way Daniel remembered Ethan's coffee order without asking. Just the way Ethan noticed when Daniel wasn't okay, even when he insisted he was. Nothing serious. Nothing dangerous. Nothing that could change everything. But love doesn't ask for permission. It crept in quietly, through lingering glances, through hands brushing a second too long, through the way their worlds began to orbit each other without warning. And then came the moment neither of them could ignore. It was late. The city had gone quiet, wrapped in darkness. They sat on the rooftop of Ethan's apartment, legs dangling over the edge, sharing a bottle they hadn't touched in minutes. "I should probably stop coming here so much," Daniel said suddenly. Ethan's chest tightened. "Why?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He just stared out at the skyline, jaw tense. "Because this," he gestured between them, "is getting complicated." Ethan swallowed. "Complicated doesn't mean wrong." Daniel turned to him then, eyes searching, conflicted. "It does when you know how it ends." "And how does it end?" Ethan asked, his voice quieter now. Daniel hesitated. "With one of us leaving." The words lingered, heavy and unavoidable. "Then don't leave," Ethan said, barely above a whisper. Daniel laughed, but there was no humor in it. "It's not that simple." "It could be," Ethan insisted, his heart pounding now. "If you just..." "Ethan," Daniel cut in, his voice breaking slightly. "I'm leaving next month." The world seemed to stop. "Leaving?" Ethan repeated. "For good." Silence swallowed them whole. They tried to stay away after that. They stopped texting first. Stopped making plans. Stopped showing up in the places they knew the other would be. But love has a way of undoing even the strongest decisions. It pulled them back together in quiet, desperate ways. Missed calls returned, accidental meetings that didn't feel accidental at all, conversations they promised would be the last. Each time, it became harder to let go. Each time, it felt more impossible to walk away. The night before Daniel was supposed to leave, he showed up at Ethan's door. No warning. No message. Just him, standing there, breath unsteady, eyes filled with everything he had been trying to hide. "I tried," Daniel said. "I really did." Ethan didn't speak. He just stepped aside. Daniel walked in slowly, as if crossing a line he could never uncross. "I thought if I stayed away, it would get easier," Daniel continued. "But it didn't. It just made me realize," he trailed off, his voice faltering. "Realize what?" Ethan asked. Daniel looked at him then, really looked at him, and whatever walls he had built finally collapsed. "That I'm in love with you." The words hit like a storm breaking. Ethan's breath caught. "Then why are you leaving?" Daniel stepped closer, close enough that Ethan could feel the warmth of him, the hesitation, the pull. Because I don't know if staying will ruin us, Daniel admitted. And I don't know if leaving will ruin me. Silence stretched between them, fragile and electric. Ethan reached out, his fingers brushing against Daniel's hand. Then stay, he said softly. Or don't. But don't pretend this isn't real. Daniel's hand tightened around his. For a moment, it felt like the world had made its choice. The next morning, Ethan stood at the airport, heart racing, eyes scanning the crowd. He didn't know if Daniel would come. Didn't know if last night had been a beginning, or just a goodbye. Passengers moved past him, announcements echoed overhead, time slipping through his fingers. Then he saw him. Daniel. Standing at the gate. Ticket in hand. Eyes locked on Ethan. And for a split second, neither of them moved. Daniel took a step forward. Then stopped. He looked down at the ticket, then back at Ethan. His grip tightened. His expression shifted. Like he was about to make a choice that would change everything. And then Daniel let the ticket slip from his fingers. It fluttered to the floor like something fragile finally giving up the fight. For a heartbeat, everything stood still, the noise of the airport, the movement of strangers, even Ethan's breath caught somewhere between hope and disbelief. Daniel stepped back from the gate. One step. Then another. Until he was no longer a passenger, no longer someone about to leave, but someone choosing to stay. Ethan didn't realize he was moving until he was already halfway across the distance between them. Are you sure? Ethan asked, his voice unsteady, like the question itself might break something. Daniel let out a quiet breath, his shoulders finally relaxing in a way Ethan had never seen before. No, he admitted. I'm not sure about anything, except you. That was enough. Ethan closed the space between them, pulling Daniel into him like he'd been holding back for far too long. Daniel held on just as tightly, like letting go was no longer an option he could survive. Around them, the world kept moving. Announcements continued. Flights boarded. People said their goodbyes. But for them, something had finally settled. The days that followed weren't perfect. They argued about small things, about Daniel's impulsiveness, about Ethan's need for control. They had moments where doubt crept back in, whispering that maybe leaving would have been easier. But neither of them walked away. Because now they knew what that felt like. And they didn't want it. Months later, on a quiet evening that felt oddly familiar, they found themselves back on the same rooftop where everything had almost fallen apart. The city stretched endlessly below them, lights flickering like 1,000 tiny possibilities. Ethan leaned against the railing, glancing at Daniel. You ever regret it? Daniel smiled softly. Staying? Ethan nodded. Daniel shook his head. No. Terrified, sometimes. Confused, a lot. But regret? He looked at Ethan, his expression steady. Never. Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Good, he said. There was a pause, the comfortable kind now. Then Daniel reached for Ethan's hand, intertwining their fingers like it was the most natural thing in the world. Besides, Daniel added, a teasing glint in his eyes, you'd have chased me anyway. Ethan smirked. Don't flatter yourself. Daniel laughed, leaning his head briefly against Ethan's shoulder. Time passed the way it always does, quietly, steadily, without asking permission. And somewhere along the way, complicated became worth it. Risk became home. And what if turned into something real? Years later, on another rainy evening, they found themselves outside a small corner shop. The same one. Daniel glanced at the single umbrella hanging by the door and smiled. You remember? Ethan raised an eyebrow. How could I forget? You tried to give it to me like some kind of tragic hero. Daniel laughed. It worked, didn't it? Ethan stepped closer, his voice softer now. Yeah. It did. For a moment, they just stood there, the rain falling around them like it had all those years ago. Only this time, there was no uncertainty. No hesitation. No fear of what came next. Ethan picked up the umbrella, opening it with a quiet click. "Still want to share?" he asked. Daniel slipped under it beside him, their shoulders brushing, perfectly familiar. "Always," he said. And as they walked off into the rain together, it was clear. They had tried to stay away. But love hadn't just won. It had stayed.